on retail. And so I'd like to invite William Bain, a policy advisor at the British Retail Consortium, to share some thoughts on post-Brexit impact on retail.
Thank you very much indeed, Eugene. As Eugene said, I'm the BRC's policy advisor on all matters trade and Brexit. Have been at the BRC for 4 years. So having been through the process from the beginning of the triggering of Article 50 into seeing its effects of the eventual deals, both the withdrawal agreement and the trade and cooperation agreement, in terms of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland and Great Britain and the European Union, I think there are some observations we can make about how it's impacting retail. Firstly, this is the biggest imposition of red tape and new regulation at one time that the industry has seen in the last 50 years. We have become used to, particularly in the food side, to just-in-time cross-border supply chains, which have allowed for products to be shipped across the Channel, shipped across the Irish Sea in a matter of hours without requiring any paperwork, any red tape, and that has supported a great expansion in the level of choice, the quality of goods, and ultimately keeping prices low, which consumers have enjoyed. And that helps very much in what is a low margin industry, as was described earlier. So really all of those are put at much greater doubt and risk by the choices that were made of the kind of Brexit deals that were adopted. And of course, let's talk about those 2 Brexit deals. So firstly, in terms of Great Britain to Northern Ireland, of course, the key Brexit deal here is the withdrawal agreement. It is that which set out in the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland, the new trading arrangements for products moving across from GB to NI. And what we've seen is an enormous expansion in the compliance time and person power that has had to be devoted by both individual businesses and the BRC and the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium as the representing trade body. Effectively, we've been involved in another set of negotiations, even although there is a deal which has been in place here. And so, as we've discovered that, what was set out in the protocol needs substantial further policy making in order to make it work for the reality of supply chains going from GB to NI. Products being put into lorries in Scotland or in Liverpool and sent across, the Irish Sea by ferry within 4 hours. And so you look at some of the requirements on things like pre-notification for products of animal origin, requiring 24 hours notice. Well, retailers which have operated on a GB and island of Ireland basis collectively, I've just found that incredibly difficult to deal with. And so we have had some issues at some times with shortages of certain products. Now, retailers have been inventive, as you would expect them to be. They've looked at sourcing a bit more from Northern Ireland, sourcing a bit more from the Republic to make sure there are as few gaps on shelves as possible. But over time, we are going to see problems in terms of availability when consumers want the goods, choice and price. And remember, Northern Ireland consumers have about half the spending power of consumers in GB because of the differentials in terms of wage levels. So there's been a considerable task in trying to come to terms with the new regulations, making them work, the amount of hours being devoted into this. And of course, we're now effectively in a new negotiation process now, where the UK government and the European Commission will have to look at, in terms of food, around 18 different categories of controls and regulatory processes to be gone through, affecting around 270 different products or processes. It's a huge exercise. And on top of this, you have the introduction of major new online infrastructure, such as the TSS, the Trader Support Scheme. You also have a movement assistance scheme, which is there to help companies which would not qualify for some of the easements that were agreed bilaterally and then have been supplemented by unilateral action by the UK in terms of GB to NI goods movements. So it is there really, one could set up a vast industry in terms of compliance with these new rules alone. And this is really something that we see on a daily basis in terms of contact from members to ourselves about this. And I think no consideration of the impact of Brexit on retail could occur without a consideration of what's happening on the protocol. So we hope that in the coming months, we will see prompt decisions being made by the EU and by the UK jointly, rather than unilateral actions. We hope that there will be intensified engagement with business in Northern Ireland, particularly retail. And we hope that some pragmatic solutions will be adopted that produce certainty, consistency, and keep costs as low as possible for retailers. And obviously the key impact there, to keep the costs low for consumers. We also have major issues in terms of e-commerce, with the requirement, unless anything changes, on the 1st of October for individual customs declarations for each package or packet moving over from GB to NI. We also have issues around the establishment rule. So it is the case that companies who wish to send from the 1st of November packages or packets into Northern Ireland from GB need to have some form of business establishment in Northern Ireland or the EU. There's even more intense rules if you want to use the UK Trader scheme, which means that your goods would be presumed to be not at risk of entering the EU single market. So this is causing enormous hassle for companies in this time, and really Brexit is not done as some people would have you believe. It's a daily set of experiences and a daily set of policy responses that are needed to make these Brexit arrangements work. In terms of GB to EU, what we've seen is really, again, a considerable rise in red tape. We've seen, these were issues that I was talking about really 3 years ago when I first did a piece with The Observer in January of 2018 about the consequences of leaving the common VAT area and what that would mean. That's why the BRC advocated that the UK stayed within the common VAT area, really as the best outcome for e-commerce. And so what we're seeing are goods being rejected at the door by consumers within the EU because they have to pay very high import VAT bills. We're seeing retailers not knowing whether it will cost more to have the goods come back to Great Britain or simply dump them somewhere in the EU because of the complexity of the customs declarations and the import VAT involved. And really this is sort of down to a few things. One, we now have import VAT considerations involving 27 EU member states, different rates, some aspects are different in each member state. So that's caused enormous complexity and regulatory challenges for retailers trying to comply with it. Second, consumers are unsure about how much the goods will cost Will they face some additional charges at the doorstep, levied at point of delivery or point of arrival? Now, things will get a little bit easier in July when the EU's one-stop shop for third country retailers comes in. And so at least the import VAT on the good can be dealt with at point of sale rather than point of arrival or point of delivery. But that doesn't deal with import VAT implications on the insurance of the goods, the transit of the goods, the National Postal Service handling charge when the goods arrive in the European Union, nor any additional customs fees. And of course, there is a customs declaration that has to go with this item as well. If you think about it, if you were buying, let's say, a fragrance or a perfume that might be costing 25 or 30 pounds, and you have a 40 pound customs declaration on top of that, that is more than the cost of the goods themselves. Of course, that's diminishing sales. And so what are companies doing to respond to this? Well, some are looking at some tie-ups with the fast parcel operators to try and develop some cross-industry solutions to this, looking at changes in Incoterms, looking at providing a delivery duty paid model to customers in the EU. Some are looking at more profound structural changes, which means moving the distribution hubs into the EU to therefore obviate the need to pay import VAT on every transaction coming over from Great Britain. So there are enormous regulatory but also structural responses which retailers are working their way through. I think it is clear to say that Brexit was never an event, it is a process. It is a process being faced by retailers on a daily basis. Some of it will require adjustment by companies and the industry collectively itself. Some of it requires further action from the UK government. And some of it may be the subject of that 5-yearly review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which is due to begin in 2026. Thanks, Eugene.
Thanks so much, William. That was really interesting, and I loved, kind of the way you phrased Brexit as it's not just an event; it's a process, right? It's not a light switch that just happened; it's a dimmer switch. There's constant, evolution and response that retailers need to keep in mind as we move forward. And I think
Eugene, just a question. I think your video's off. There you go.
Oh, no, there we go. Sorry about that. And so I think leading into our next conversation with Paul Cooper from N. Brown, I think it is kind of interesting just considering, the significant impact that Brexit has had on retail and the impact of COVID on retail and the shift from, physical only to online. And so, Paul, it'd be great if you could share a little bit of your perspective on e-commerce's ability to adapt and to support the changes that retailers are needing to make to respond to these shifting market conditions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eugene. So, Paul Cooper, I've worked at N. Brown for 5 years. I joined, so my background is very much technology strategy. I joined 5 years ago to sort of head up the efforts around digital transformation. And then 2 years ago, I focused on more agile transformation. So obviously the digital piece, talking to customers, getting the customer understanding, but then really focusing internally in terms of operations. So I think we've probably got a good perspective of some of the events that's happened. N. Brown itself is an organisation that's been around for 160 years. It was started in Manchester by someone called James David Williams, J.D. Williams. And he was one of the first people to utilise Royal Mail's packet post product to ship fashion out to consumers. So I think innovation is something that's kind of at the heart of N. Brown, I think. However, if you look at the last, it's been around for a long time, the level of innovation that we've had to adapt to over the last 2 years has just been exponentially difficult and challenging. I think being a digital retailer, that was put us in very, very good stead, and also being a UK focused digital retailer has helped us kind of navigate and manage some of the impacts of both the pandemic and Brexit. We 5 years ago really focused on, I'm going to picking up a lot of the points that the panelists have made really resonate on some of the things we've been doing. So within our digital transformation, we were a kind of a heavily catalog based sort of offline sales organization. We also had the region of 20 to 30 stores, and we took the decision to really take our brands and focus those brands on sort of key customer segments within the UK. And we also looked at ourselves at M Brown and just got very clear on what our purpose was. So we exist to make people look and feel amazing. And what that then means is, so the next level of detail down is, we're targeting customer segments and giving them experiences that doesn't just end at the point of sale. It's making sure that that outcome is achieved when someone comes to one of our brands. They browse, they understand, they buy something that then makes them feel great, which means that we have to consider that product, where it is, and also necessarily that product doesn't necessarily finish as soon as we sold it. It goes out to the customer and potentially it could come back. If it comes back, that's it, a learning experience for us. Why did it come back? Why didn't it make that customer feel amazing? We want to understand that, so you have to encompass everything. But in terms of like some of the impacts, so last year the pandemic has meant that organisations have had to really adapt to customer behaviour. It's changed significantly. So, for example, we were, so 5 years ago we were sort of 70% online. Now we're in sort of the mid-90s. As part of that as well, customer behaviour has changed from sort of 30% mobile to about 80% mobile. And I think the reason why it's important, if you look at the consumer behaviour, so certainly last year or before last year, people would commute into the office and browse their mobile phone and look to buy stuff on that commute. So the traffic within the day, you would set up your marketing campaigns based on the traffic through the day. However, people don't commute anymore. Their behaviour's different, the channel behaviour is different. So again, picking up on people, you need to be channel agnostic, but you really need to be aware of channels and the behaviour across channels. It really influences your business model and your how you market to customers. But one of the big impacts, obviously, the pandemic was that seasonal change, and also the product set change. The products that people were interested in, they weren't going out, they weren't buying party dresses, they're buying homeware and loungewear and things like that. And if you look at the traditional companies would buy 10,000 party dresses with the party season to come in. If you were sat on that stock during the pandemic, then that's a lot of stock's a write-off, right? So rather than having deep, you try to go broad, loungewear, underwear, all that kind of stuff that people are still buying, you go broad. Unfortunately, with then Brexit, when you go broad, you have to have more just-in-time inventory. So your supply chain bringing things in. You have more stock on the water. You have more stock coming from Europe. You have more stock coming from Asia. Rather than in big drops, you're trying to optimize and bring things in. So obviously, when Brexit comes in, you're more susceptible to supply chain disruption, and your customer behaviour. I think Mark made a great point in that people expect stock now, or expect product now to be Amazon delivering within 2 hours, right? People expect things to be there. So if you've got a thin level of stock and people are looking to buy stuff, but it could take 5 days to come somewhere from Asia, you typically make that customer a promise to say, well, it'll be 5 to 6 days before you get your product. When the supply chains get disrupted, you're falling behind on your customer promise. And more agile retailers like Amazon are kind of capturing those sales and coming in and capitalizing on the market. So yeah, it really is quite sort of two challenging events that have sort of created a perfect storm for retailers, and being kind of agile has just meant that we've been able to ride it out. A lot of the investments we've made before. So obviously we, as I mentioned, sort of having a store estate, we took the decision to close those stores and just focus on our brands and our customer experience, because we wanted to sort of broaden some of the product offering. If you're having stores, you're very limited to the amount of stock you can put in a store, and that experience. So we sort of broadened our product set. And as you say, we also took the decision to really get those brands right within the UK, and that's really helped sort of insulate us from some of the Brexit discussions. But ultimately, I think as Will pointed out, we've still been impacted. So we treat Northern Ireland as part of the UK. Right? We're just set up to do that. So we weren't set up to understand that we had orders going out. We had a big shipping container, lots of shipping containers on the way out to Northern Ireland over that period. Because we'd gone broad, someone had ordered a gift set, right, as part of it's Christmas time, that kind of stuff. People are giving out gifts, but that gift set had a chocolate bar in it, which meant the whole container got stuck. Right, and we weren't set up to just, to say, oh well, by the way, £1 million worth of clothes and a chocolate bar. It's very hard to sort of go to that granular level of detail, and sort of the level of red tape and bureaucracy that then came in to try and sort that out and get that on stock, I think was quite difficult to manage. And I think, as Will says, there's still more of that to come. I've just noted down that having a declaration per packet, I'm going to give my head of supply chain a nudge on that one just to make sure he's aware that that's coming. But I think there's as you say, there's elements of adaptability and change that you just need to be aware of, and that things will always change. And I think that's I guess that's the key takeaway. I've been involved in big transformation projects, as I say, a digital transformation and an agile transformation, but I have a difficult relationship with the word transformation, because people seem to think that there's an end date, and there isn't. Transformation never stops, and you have to, companies that realize that, I think, are the ones that will adapt much more in the future, rather than the ones that think they can just do a big multi-million-pound year transformation and then done, I've transformed now, and everything will be rosy. But yeah, that's a quick whistle-stop tour of sort of impact and things from my background, but happy to address any questions. So I guess back over to you, Eugene.
Great, thanks so much, Paul. I think it's really interesting how you talked a little bit about transformation, and how it's not just a one and done; it's an ongoing thing. And I think it's kind of similar to the point that William made about Brexit. It's not an event; it's a process, and the same thing holds true for transformation. It's not just a one and done; it's an ongoing thing. And similar to building innovation capabilities, something that I'm focused on. It's not just a light switch you turn on. Fostering those is an ongoing process, and so it's really important to kind of think not just about a specific due date. It's more of a longer timeline. And you also mentioned a little bit about the importance of making sure that inventory is available online. And we're going to post a question for everyone to answer, a survey question around whether or not you or your company are exposing your inventory online. So if you could take a moment to answer that question, the general audience, that'd be great. And we'll make sure that those answers are, the responses are available, so you can see what the consensus was from the rest of the attendees. And I think something else that was interesting in your talk, Paul, was the importance not only of inventory online, but the challenges then of supply chain disruption and how that can impact the ability for your inventory to be made available online.